how vindicated I felt this morning. Sorry, Emma, go on.
No, you've been warning about him for a long time, but also I think that he is a huge, he's a traitor. He could not be trusted. But also the Punjab, I think that while you might have broken the back of Bradri politics when you won with a landslide majority in Bradford West, I think the Punjab in Pakistan is very much about Bradri politics, and this is how people like Chaudhry Sarwar feast on that. And that's the first point I wanted to make. But the second thing is, everything you said earlier in your introduction about Imran Khan, the assassination attempts, how this has happened, the foreign kind of interference of regime change, 100% I agree with it. But what astounds me is the naivety. I've been speaking to a lot of Pakistani people from Pakistan itself today, and it astounds me the naivety that they have, because they believe that the army is protecting Imran Khan, despite the statement made by General Bajwa over the last day or so. They feel that, there's this patriotism about the army, that they can't criticize it, and everything's going to be okay, and there's no assassination attempt. It's not that easy to do. And then you give them examples of things that have happened in Pakistan, and they just refute that. They feel that this is okay, Imran Khan's going to win. And this kind of attempt I have at waking them up to say, okay, it's good to be optimistic, but let's be realistic here as well as to what he's up against and what's happening here. There's no guarantees what the Supreme Court's going to decide. And then, 3 months is a long time. He has to bring out a budget in that time. I think it's 4th or 5th of June his budget is due. And there's a lot that could go wrong here in terms of his personal security has to be stepped up. And they're like, no, it's fine. We can walk right up to his home at the moment, and it's fine. There's no need for this. So I don't know what's happening with the people of Pakistan, but I think they need to wake up and smell the coffee pretty quickly as to what's at stake here.
It's absolutely correct what you say. The army will protect the Prime Minister right up until they don't. And the moment that they don't, he will either be overthrown by the army. I mean, how many times has the Pakistan army overthrown the elected leadership of the country? How many Pakistan has had half of its lifetime under military dictatorship. So this rose-petaled view of the Pakistan army is wholly misplaced. And the reality is that the top brass of the Pakistan army is a creature of the United States of America. And that's why the Chief of Army Staff, General Bajwa, that you just referred to, flatly contradicted the Prime Minister's view on current international events, sanctions, the European Union, the United States. He flatly contradicted the Prime Minister, the elected Prime Minister. Imagine in Britain if the elected Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, said this, this and this, the Chief of the British Army flatly contradicting him in public the very next day. Imran Khan said to the European Union, what are we, your slaves? You're going to order us with whom we can do business, referring to the oil and the wheat that they are buying at a very good price from Russia. And the general flatly contradicted it, talked about how vital it was to keep good relations with the US and the EU and so on. The truth is, Pakistan's best interests lie not with the United States, but with China, which has stood with Pakistan in dark days and fine, through every grim year of even military dictatorship. They have never interfered in Pakistan's internal affairs. They have been an absolutely loyal friend to Pakistan. That's where your future lies, people of Pakistan, not with some joker called Joe Biden in Washington. Emma, thanks for that great call. Melvin is in New York. Welcome back, Melvin.
Yes. Hello, George. Two things. The two things. First, you are familiar, I'm sure, with Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon, our war manufacturers here in the United States, and I'm sure you have some in your area.
Yes,
I believe if we want to...
Although, unlike the American Congress, I own no stock in any of those companies. Although a very large number of members of your government do.
I understand, and that's actually the point I was going to get to. I believe that we need to, and I don't know how to do it. That's why I'm calling for your advice. How we get people together to actually stop, you know, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, all those people from actually making money off of this war. You know, I don't know how to do that. Maybe you have some advice on that. And the other thing, the second thing is, I actually have some friends in Ukraine, okay? I've been talking to them. And they're not on the side, the Donbass or that. They're on the other side. So they're European-speaking Ukrainians. And they actually have stated to me completely different what the American media shows. And they're actually afraid for their lives of actually coming onto like my YouTube channel or anything on social media anywhere and actually speaking the truth. It is something I figured I would get out there.
Well, I'm glad you did, and it's absolutely true. All of the people of eastern Ukraine want nothing to do with the coup regime in Kiev. But what is less well understood is that at least half of the people of western Ukraine absolutely deplore the way that their country is being used and abused as a tool of American policy, implemented through a comedian who's now the richest comedian on the entire earth. Go figure. Melvin, I wish I knew the answer to your first question, but I don't. You get the politicians you deserve. Your country and mine are ruled by people who are part of a corrupt nexus, whereby everything in the economy and indeed in the wider society is engineered in a way that a very small number of us can profit mightily from the arrangements made, and the rest of us just tread the hamster wheel, earning just enough to stay alive, to get back on the hamster wheel tomorrow, unless we're very unlucky and we go lame, metaphorically speaking, and are no longer of any use. And then we might as well starve or freeze, as this coming winter may show, to death. So the answer to your question is, we have to change that system. We have to change those politicians. And if we don't, we'll be on that hamster wheel until we fall off it. Samuel's in Manchester, in England. Go ahead, Samuel.
Hello, George. Thank you very much for having me on.
Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Two kind of unrelated questions, two somewhat related quick questions. First of all, you obviously see a lot of dark things and a lot of disturbing things, and you know the consequences of those things and how they affect people. How do you live with that darkness you see? And also, kind of related to that, many years ago, after your testimony to the US Senate, you went on a program hosted by Alex Jones of InfoWars. Alex Jones at the time was very critical of the US, the UK, and our allies' foreign policy in the Middle East. He was very critical of our respective governments on domestic issues as well. And though he had his eccentricities, he was a serious commentator and broadcaster. He's now a lunatic who goes on about child sex colonies on Mars and does all this race-baiting pandering to the alt-right. Do you have any idea how Alex Jones went so weird?
No, I've never met him. I've only been on his show once, as you say, some years ago. But I agree with your assessment. I've no idea whether it is trauma of some kind or something worse than that. But definitely I wouldn't go on his show now. But of course, I was also on the BBC many times. And I'm not responsible for the crimes of the BBC. And I'm not responsible, obviously, for Alex Jones's trips to Mars.
I'm not saying you are,
but
George. No.
I know you're not. I just want to make that clear to the wider audience. As to darkness, I have light in my heart, in my mind. I have faith. I believe in God. I believe in humanity. I believe that God created humanity and that good and bad, if you like, God and the devil are present in every one of us. And that life is a struggle between good and evil. And that's true also of ourselves. We all are capable of terrible things, and we are also capable of good things. I believe that conscience is your daily communion with God. You have a conscience for a reason. Nobody else has got a conscience. A tiger doesn't have a conscience. A gorilla doesn't have a conscience, but we do. And that conscience tells us when we're doing the right thing and when we're doing the wrong thing. And as long as I follow that path, as I'm not perfect, I'm not a saint, of course. One of the reasons why I work so hard is I'm trying to make up for such sins as I have committed in my life. And that's what keeps me going, keeps me focused, and keeps me following the light rather than the darkness. Let me read some social media. Thanks, Samuel, for that. 30427 says, US at it again, but it's not going so well. They got to punch harder. And Louis Duncan said they're trying, that's to overthrow Imran Khan, but I think he may survive it. Well, if the election happens, Lewis, as I said earlier, I believe he'll sweep the country. He really will sweep the country, and then all these betrayers will have to face the consequences of that. M.N. Nazim said, yes, he survived. The motion was dismissed by the Deputy Speaker. Imran Khan fought to the last ball, being the cricketer he was. And Arrohyadav says, hats off to Imran Khan for fighting back against the warmongers in the West. Imran Khan is the son of Pakistan, like Putin is the son of Russia. And Soren Ropstorff says the US is failing on every front at the minute, and its support outside Europe and North America is next to be gone. And Tomislav says there are 3 countries in line: Pakistan for an Asian lesson, Hungary for EU unity, and Serbia, not much significance, but they are so used to punishing it. And George says, may Imran Khan teach the world not to let governments bow to external bribes or promises. Strength from within. Let true democracy shine its light upon those who would sell out their country. And Kevin Hughes says, destroying the economy and impoverishing Europe removes a huge market for Chinese produce. It might sound like a conspiracy theory, but it's actually in American economic interests to do that. You're absolutely correct about that. Let me hear from California. Why wouldn't I want to go to California, where Josh is on the line? Go ahead, Josh.
Good evening, George. How are you today?
By the grace of God, good, thank you. What would you like to say?
Well, I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on the genuine prospects for peace as you see it, not only in Ukraine, but in Palestine and Yemen and everywhere else.
Well, there are 3 big fronts, of course. Let me stick with Ukraine for the minute. I will touch on the other 2. But on Ukraine, if logic prevails, then the Turkish peace process and negotiations will prevail when they resume this week. The question is whether the Ukrainian government is free to settle. And by free to settle, I mean, are they, number 1, free of US pressure to settle? And number 2, free of fascist and far-right pressure inside the Ukrainian military and inside the Ukrainian polity itself to settle. If the answer to those two questions is yes, then there will be a peace agreement, perhaps even this week. I do think that whilst you might imagine Joe Biden wants to keep the war going, and of that I'm sure, they have the Afghanistan syndrome in mind of prolonging it and bleeding Russia, causing economic and social problems back in Russia by a prolonged war. That I'm sure is true, but it isn't true in Ukraine. And neither, quite quickly, will it be true in Europe. The German people have begun turning on their unholy, grotesque alliance government between the Social Democrats and the Greens. The Greens in Germany, like the Greens everywhere in my experience, are actually war lovers. They're warmongers, and they are driving the German government policy at this point in time. But the workers, on whom the SPD, the main partner in the coalition, the workers have begun quickly to rise up, because they're the ones who are going to be made unemployed. They're the ones who are going to be made poorer and colder by the German government's policy. But in what is perhaps a crucial new development, the German employers have begun to rise up and say to the government, listen, our economy is going to be destroyed. Our manufacturing sector is going to close down in a week or 2 weeks if you don't stop this ludicrous posturing over the issue of paying for gas in rubles. What is so extraordinary about paying a country for its produce in that country's money? There's nothing unusual or extraordinary about that idea at all. So between the hammer of the German employers and the anvil of the German working class, I think you might see a beginning of a capitulation by the German government and the other governments in Europe who are not as rich as Germany. Places like Hungary, like Slovakia, like the Czech Republic, are already saying we'll have to pay in rubles. We can't afford to go without Russia's gas. So the European Union end of things may very rapidly begin to rattle down. And that in turn will put pressure on Zelensky in Ukraine and on even Biden in the White House. Because of course, the revolt that's begun in Germany might well spread to the United States as prices rise and shortages mount. I think there's no prospect of peace in Palestine because you cannot have peace in Palestine without justice, and there is no prospect of justice in Palestine. So that conflict will continue. There's now a ceasefire for Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak to all Muslims that are following the show. There's a ceasefire for not 30 days of Ramadan, but 60 days. In that 60 days, a political settlement has got to be found. I very much hope that it will be, and I have some reason for hoping that it will. Josh, thanks for that call. In 1987, the late Duchess of Windsor's gems were sold for a record price of £31 million, 6 times the estimate. What was her name? Bessie Wallace, Wallace Gromit, or Wallace Simpson? You can tell me after the break.
hi, George. The deep state, we mentioned it before. So rather than fear-mongering at everything that's going on at the moment, with the COVID, the wars, blah, 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 why aren't we addressing the deep state rather than this fear-mongering that's going over and over again?
How do you address it?
What I'm trying to get across, and hopefully your listeners will understand this, there is a deep state at work, and you know that.
Everybody knows that. That's a statement of the bleeding obvious.
So what? Oh, so let's do something about that. Rather than ratting and rolling about the
give us a lead. Be our leader. Be our leader, Del.
Who are the deep states?
Yeah.
Oh, what a brilliant question. Those that are all over us. And what should we do about them? We should make them accountable.
I'm just trying to work out whether you're in the territory of shape-shifting lizards, or you're talking about MI5 and MI6.
Please don't turn it into a circus, George. You know full well what's going on, and please don't.
I do. I'm just struggling to get from you what it is we should be doing about them. What should I do about MI5 and MI6? And how should I do it?
Just stand up and go, there's something inherently wrong here. And
There's something really wrong here. There you are. I've sorted it, Del. Thanks for the call.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
And the answer, of course, is Wallace Gromit. Wallace Simpson. £31 million for her jewels. Now, the poll is still running. 5,760 people have voted. Is Pakistan's Prime Minister next for regime change? On Twitter, it's yes 73, no 27. On YouTube, it's yes 74, no 26. And on Telegram, it's yes 80 and no 20. So you've got, another 10 minutes or so, maybe 15, to vote on that on my Twitter feed, on my YouTube channel, and on my Telegram. Thanks to everyone who's donated to the mother of all talk shows to keep it going. Some people have been very generous, and a significant number of people have donated. I don't have the final number yet, but all I can say is, I'm sorry to say, it's not enough. So you still have an hour and 10 minutes to make your donation. I've never asked you for anything before. I've done 150 of these shows. Millions and millions of you have enjoyed them. And all I'm asking now is that you make a small donation. It can be $1. $1. A small donation. But I'm asking you all to do it. Because if you don't do it, we might well have to close this show as we've been forced to close the Moats Extra on a Wednesday night. Now, Wayne is in Cheshire. He's a good caller. Let's hear from him again. Wayne, welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Welcome, sir.
I'd like to donate £10 for the show.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for that, my friend.
Right. No one's talking about this, even on the corporate media and the underground media and everything. It's quite concerning to me. Now, I think when I tell you, it might prick your memory. When the Berlin Wall went down and the USSR collapsed in the early 1990s, there was a situation where at Murmansk, the nuclear submarines and some of the nuclear aircraft carriers basically were beached and they were rotting away. And Russia didn't have the money or the expertise to decommission them. So what happened was they asked America, and America said, yes, we'll give it on one condition. And one of the conditions, they said, we want to decommission the suitcases. So Russia said, what are you talking about? This is mainstream media at the time. We said, we know about the nuclear weapons in the suitcases. They were specially made. They were out throughout Eastern Europe. So Russia said, yes, we will get them back. You can decommission them. They get most most of them back, but they said some have gone missing or been stolen, and they went missing in Ukraine.
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm hell of a intrigued, Wayne, as I'm sure the rest of the audience is, and we definitely need to look into it. I'm seeing a movie, a documentary, or even a feature film coming in front of my eyes of the suitcase, the dirty bomb in a suitcase. But Ukraine is undoubtedly, I've got to say this, it pains me to say it, the source of many bad things in Europe and in the world, from organ donations to sex trafficking and all kinds of things. It has been run by bad people. Even the guy that was overthrown in 2014, by the way, he was also bad. He was not overthrown because he was bad. He was overthrown because the Americans didn't trust him on geopolitical issues. But he was a corrupt individual. And there have been many corrupt individuals, including the present one, in charge of Ukraine. Leave them in charge of a nuclear suitcase. I wouldn't leave them in charge of a dog. That's the truth of the matter. Wayne, an intriguing call. No doubt people will provide further and better particulars. Marcus is in Chorley in England. Go ahead, Marcus.
Good evening, George.
Evening.
The way we're going with all these price hikes and stuff like that, quite clearly we're on the path to walking around with a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah, well, the inflation is enormous here and even worse in the United States.
Yeah, and people have also been saying, oh, well, Vladimir could nuke us, as opposed to starving to death. How come being nuked is actually a better situation?
No, it isn't. There's nothing worse than being nuked, because there will be nothing left. I don't think we're going to starve, but I was listening to the news there. It's not often I agree with anything that a Labour spokesperson says, but I agree with them on that. There will have to be rationing. Now, everything's rationed, Marcus, as you know. It's either rationed by price or it's and availability, or it's rationed by government regulation. Everything is rationed in our society, and either petrol will become so expensive that only the richest people can buy it, gas will be so expensive that only the richest people can warm themselves, and food will become so expensive that only the richest people will be able to eat, and the rest of us will be on thin gruel indeed. So that's the new world order that these people have plunged us into.
Truck driver. But with the way that diesel's going through the roof and fuel's definitely going through the roof.
Yeah.
I've actually had to go onto a government contract because I know that I'll get employed.
Well, it's now £1 near where I am now, and I'm not telling you where I am because we're avoiding the incoming. It's £1.87 for diesel. £1.87 a litre for diesel. I filled my car up the other day, and it was already nearly a quarter full. I filled it up. It was £101, and I've got a Volvo. A Volvo. We're not talking a Cadillac here. A family car, £101 for just over 3/4 of a tank. Now, people will not be able to do that for much longer, Marcus.
About a month ago, I filled my truck up. It was £500 for the tank. The following week, it was £700.
What is that for a truck?
On top. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow. Unbelievable.
At no point.
And it's not stopping yet. It's not stopping yet, Marcus.
No.
We ain't seen nothing yet. This
No, that's what I'm
inflation
telling people.
hasn't even properly started yet.
That's what I'm telling people. It's the tip of the iceberg, and we're going to get effed on a monumental scale, and people do not understand where this is going and how bad this is going to be.
Unbelievable. Marcus, great call, mate. Kevin is in Grimsby on Imran Khan. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hello, George.
Hi.
Yes, just a few days ago, one of the important things I noticed about this whole Imran Khan business, there's background, obviously, to the situation today. It's criticisms in the past, and but Imran Khan, a few days ago, The Guardian and other sources have mentioned this, that he claimed that he'd been threatened by Washington. They have been pressing him for a while now to have American military base in Pakistan. Now, recently, I mean, America has got about 750 foreign U.S. military bases spread over about 80 countries. And recently, Imran Khan, I noticed, there's been some countries that haven't been friendly with their neighbors are shaking hands to stand up with a multipolar world, being born against this unipolar American. Yes. And Imran Khan recently applauded his neighbor, India, for standing up to America. I mean, they wouldn't even entertain some of the top UK officials trying to plead and trying to... And India has said, no, we have fuel and rupees to rubles with Russia. We have a lot of trade. We're not going to sanction them. And he had a bit of criticism by some of the anti-Indian Pakistan people because there is this sort of background, mixed sort of feeling.
Well, look, Kevin, you're absolutely right. The tectonic plates are shifting. Russia has the best possible relations with India and the best possible relations with China. China does not have great relations with India. This could be a bridge, a Eurasian bridge, and I hope it will include Pakistan, a new political and economic entity. Well, look, I've got a break for the news, but you've no idea who we've got coming up next. Only one of the Fleet Street legends. Stay tuned.
Pakistan's president has dissolved parliament, a step towards early elections, following an attempt to remove Prime Minister Imran Khan from office. It comes after Parliament's Deputy Speaker refused to hold a vote of no confidence that Khan was expected to lose. Khan claims the United States is leading a conspiracy to remove him because of his criticism of US policy and other foreign policy decisions he has taken. Opposition politicians have ridiculed the allegation and the US has denied this. Khan has also been critical of America's war on terror. Khan visited Moscow to meet President Vladimir Putin as Russia was launching the invasion of Ukraine. The Prime Minister is widely believed to have come to power with the help of Pakistan's army, but now observers say they have fallen out. His political opponents seized the opportunity to demand the no-confidence vote after persuading a number of his coalition partners to defect to them. On Sunday, Information Minister Fawad Chaudhry told MPs that Pakistani officials had told of an operation for a regime change by a foreign government. This, he said, went against the constitution, and the Deputy Speaker chairing the session, a close ally of the Prime Minister, proceeded to declare the vote unconstitutional. The opposition had now filed a petition to the country's Supreme Court, which is assessing whether the decision not allow a vote of no confidence against the Prime Minister is valid. At least 6 people have been killed and 10 injured in a shooting in the center of Sacramento, police in California's state capital say. People fled through the streets after rapid gunfire rang out in an area packed with restaurants and bars in the early hours of today. No suspect is yet in custody in the wake of the shootings. They took place around 2 a.m. in an area at 10th Street in Key, a few streets from the state capitol building. Britain's Transport Secretary has said energy will not be rationed in the UK, despite pressures on supplies globally. Grant Shapps ruled this out after Labour's Shadow Business Secretary suggested ministers might need to prepare for rationing. Some European countries have moved towards rationing as energy costs rise and supplies tighten. Shapps said the energy strategy would be announced later this week. Plans to expand nuclear and wind power are expected to form part of the strategy, which has been delayed amid cost concerns. Conservative MP David Warburton has told friends that he has been admitted to a psychiatric hospital after allegations about his behaviour were made in a Sunday newspaper. The MP has said that he's being treated for severe shock and stress, adding, "This has been sheer hell." The Somerton and From MP has had his Tory whip withdrawn, pending an investigation into allegations about his conduct, which are being examined by Parliament's Independent Complaints and Grievances Scheme. Prince Andrew returned from the Falklands War a changed man, he said in a now deleted piece posted on his ex-wife's Instagram account. The Duke of York recalled his time as a helicopter pilot in the conflict 40 years ago in 3 posts on Saturday, and only hours later all posts were removed. It is unclear why the 700-word account was taken down. Andrew gave up the right to use His Royal Highness in an official capacity in January. This was when the Queen stripped her son of his honorary military roles, as he faced a US civil action over sexual assault allegations, which he denied. Virginia Goff sued Andrew for allegedly sexually assaulting her on 3 occasions when she was 17. The case later reached a multi-million-pound settlement out of court. The official Telegram channel of the Russian Defense Ministry has shared a claim that reports of civilian deaths in the Ukraine town of Bucha are fake. Videos from the city, which was recently retaken by Ukrainian forces, appear to show civilians lying dead in the street, some of them apparently with their hands tied, have shocked the world. The reposted report claims that Russian forces left the city on the 30th of March. Where have these pictures been for 4 days? The fact that they were absent only confirms that this is fake, he quoted. The Russian Defense Ministry have not commented officially on the situation in Bucha. The report mentioned above was reposted by the ministry. The post then claimed that after Russian forces left Bucha, the Ukrainian armed forces subjected the city to artillery strikes, which also could have led to civilian deaths. A mass grave found in the city, it says, was created by the Ukrainians. The Taliban announced today a ban on the cultivation of narcotics in Afghanistan, the world's biggest opium producer. In a statement it said if anyone violates the decree, the crop will be destroyed immediately and the violator will be treated according to the Shari law. The order announced at a news conference by the Ministry of Interior in Kabul said the order said the production, use or transportation of other narcotics was also banned. Drug control has been one major demand of the international community of the Islamic group, which took charge of the country in August and is seeking formal international recognition in order to wind back sanctions that are severely hampering banking, business and development. And finally, US airline Alaska has announced that it has launched new gender-neutral uniform guidelines for flight attendants. The airline said it would also collaborate with a designer to develop gender-neutral uniform items for frontline employees, such as flight attendants, customer service agents and uniformed lounge employees. The announcement comes after a 2021 allegation by an Alaska Airlines employee that the airline's uniforms policy discriminated against employees whose gender expression does not fit the male and female dress codes, particularly non-binary employees, those whose gender identity falls out of the binary of male or female. The previous policy required flight attendants to wear either male or female uniforms. The airline also regulated other aspects of dress like hairstyle, makeup and jewellery based on the workers' assumed gender. The company has also created personal pronoun pins that employees can choose to wear with their uniforms. That's all your news for now. I'm Elliot King.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Join us at the College of Knowledge, where there are no tuition fees.
Well, there's the second poll of the evening. Have we now seen the anticipated false flag operation in Ukraine? A, yes. B, no. You can vote on my Twitter feed, on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, and on my Telegram channel. Now, news from the podcast. I had to read this twice. I honestly did. Had to read this twice. Big thanks, obviously, to all our subscribers and listeners to the Moats podcast. For the older amongst you, a podcast is the distilled version, about half as long as the 3-hour mother of all talk shows, which we only launched a couple of months ago, I think, a few months ago, which has become a phenomenon on the internet. And also my new Wednesday show, The Galloway Show, which I hope you'll tune into on my YouTube channel, exclusively on YouTube on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. That's also got a podcast, which has also gone off like a rocket. Now, you get them on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But this week, we had our largest ever week of downloads in the tens of thousands. But in recent weeks, the podcast has been the #1 political podcast in Algeria, Ghana, Oman, Namibia, Ecuador, Slovenia, Zimbabwe, Malaysia, Bulgaria, Iceland, Kuwait, Costa Rica, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Tanzania, and now in Singapore, #1 in those countries. The podcast's also a regular in the top 50 of China, please note, Russia, France, Spain, India, Israel, Brazil, Pakistan, Canada, Hong Kong, and Japan, as well as being active in 79 other top 100s around the world. So it's a media phenomenon, and it's tearing up the mainstream media monopoly. Please download it on Apple or Spotify and leave us a 5-star review, like Sanam in London, who said, George, I've been watching your show for a long time, and I must admit that you are a true leader and very courageous man to carry on your work of exposing the truth and showing us the other side of the picture, which always gets blocked by the US and the West through their media. God bless you always. Sanam in London. Very touching, Sanam. Thank you very much for that. Couple of calls then. William in Sheffield. Go ahead, William. Nice to hear from you.
Hi, George. I was just wondering what you make of the fact that, given that you're on the left of politics, that there are so many people who seem to be like Marxists, sort of in high positions, like Christina Georgieva at the IMF, Stoltenberg has some connections at NATO, Tedros at the World Health Organization, Guterres at the UN. And I was just wondering if you think that this whole thing is possibly being orchestrated by the New World Order to bring in a one world government?
Well, I can't think of any group of people less Marxist than the group of people you just adumbrated. I don't know where you got your information that they are former Marxists. They may be, you may be right. But the key word is former. The idea that all of this that we see in the world is Marxism could not be further from the truth. Indeed, Marx predicted that capitalism would bring all of these things 150, more than 150 years ago now. Summed up in one phrase, that all that is solid will melt away into air, and that all that is sacred will be profaned. And isn't that exactly what's happened? These things that are sacred to us have been profaned, and the solid has melted into air. That which we once thought we could rely upon, that were ours forever, but are no longer. So I'm not aware of the Marxist background of any of those people, but if you're right, and they are former Marxists. I'm afraid the emphasis is on former rather than on Marxist. Thanks for the call. John is in Yorkshire too. He wants to talk about the BBC. Go ahead, John.
Hello, George. Thank you for having me on the show.
Welcome.
First of all, I'd just like to say this, that I think that as well as what we've got is the horrors of Ukraine, there's a growing realization with literally millions of people around the world that one of the biggest enemies that we're all facing now is in fact mainstream media. And what I want to do is put a number of topics to you that I've been covering for the last couple of weeks. I've basically put 3 or 4 complaints into the BBC through their formal approach, and when they've asked me whether I wanted a response, I've said yes. These all related to various videos that perhaps you've talked about in the last couple of weeks, but I just want to talk about this in the context of what I'm talking about. So the first one was these videos that were showing black people either appearing to have been stopped from getting onto trains at a Ukraine station, or in another one where a girl appeared to be, who was black, who was literally asked to or dragged off a train. The way I worded the complaint was not to say that these were absolutely 100% authentic, because I didn't know, but I would have thought, based on the fact that they were black individuals, and we're living in a society now where the rights of black people and their ability to have their voice being heard was so important, that this should have at least been investigated, and either one way or another the BBC would say either these are authentic or they're not. The reply that I got basically didn't actually answer that question. It just said something on the lines of, with links, look, these are other issues that we've dealt with, John, although, we're not aware of the specific one that you're talking